Next up, Elaine Cordova. Elaine is the Director of Recovery Support Services at the Center for Alcohol and Drug Resources, a program of Children's Aid and Family Services, fondly known as CAPS. It's in Fairlawn, and other places. Elaine prides herself in being a humanitarian and an activist. For the past 20 years, Elaine has dedicated her life to practicing a holistic lifestyle approach for herself, her family, and her community. Elaine is an active member of the National Association for Social Workers, National Association of Professional Women, National Alliance on Mental Illness, and currently her and her daughter are co-authoring and illustrating the book for parents and children who are learning to implement positive behavior changes with their families. And last but not least, Elaine wanted me to mention that she serves as an assistant lacrosse coach. It's important. All right, so with that, Elaine, we're ready.
So good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming out here for such an important event. Being that I'm just an introducer of a particular family, I didn't want to get into the details of everything that we do over at the Center for Alcohol and Drug Resources at Children's Aid and Family Services, but I did want to express two things. One is that I'm very privileged to do what I do. I'm privileged to be the director of a program with such instrumental things that go on each day in saving the lives of families, children. And one of the things that I notice that kind of disturbs me a lot is that every family suffers from a disease. And when I was 16, my mom, she caught lymphoma. And for those of you who don't know what lymphoma is, it's cancer. So when my mom caught lymphoma, she died very, very slowly. I watched her go. I watched the people come around though. You know what I mean? Like I watched the church come and bring meals. I watched the family, the regular family, the nuclear family that I belonged to come around, and everyone was wondering how everybody was and if everything's okay. Everybody brought meals. The church came and they prayed over us. And we really had, even the extended family, we would take turns taking care of her. For years this went on before she passed. But then we have the disease of addiction, right? And it's it breaks my heart. I'm sorry, I'm a little emotional right now. That last presentation caught me a little bit, that whole idea of wanting to die at 18 years old. I know that. I'm with you in spirit. I understand that when you suffer from the disease of addiction, there is no church. There is no nuclear family who comes around and says, is everything okay? There is no extended family that comes around and says, hey, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Let me make some meals for you. Do you want me to help watch little Jimmy and take care of him? And that's something that I want to change. That's important to me. Because no family should be left alone. Something that Lisa said that was really, really important is that we are a family. This community that represents just some of the providers that are here today and are out there in the community wanting to take your hand, to take every family's hand and really give them a place to go, someone to talk to, someone to be with, someone to prop them up, someone to get their needs met. Please, reach out, call someone. We're here for you. We may not be your family of origin, but together, we are your family. And I really need you to know that. Because no addict need ever die alone, and no family need to go through this alone. So with that, I just wanted to tell you about one of the many things that we're doing at Children's Aid and Family Services, the center. We're doing this new group called CRAFT, Community Reinforcement and Family Training. This particular modality offers the family a 12-week set of tools so that if they have a loved one suffering from the disease of addiction, they can reduce that idea that there is no hope. Break down the idea of the resistance. Move forward with keeping the family together, not tearing them apart. I want to just offer this to you as a service. It will be here in Newbridge Medical Center starting in late February, early March. And I want to offer you an opportunity to please come and be a part of that group if you have a loved one who's suffering from the disease of addiction. We have several other services, but it's not my platform tonight. But it is a family's platform. I have a family here tonight, Kyle and his mom, Kathy. They have been beautiful in working through the disease of addiction, not unscathed, of course, but they definitely have shown that the power of love, passion, togetherness, and never giving up is really what's most important, because I want you to know as long as there's breath, there's hope. And with that, I give you Kyle and Kathy. Thank you.
Okay, Elena, now you're gonna make me cry because that's just the kind of journey this has been. My name is Kathy. I am the mother of a heroin addict in recovery. 8 years ago, I never thought I'd be standing up here telling you this, but I consider myself one of the lucky ones because I have met too many people over the years that have buried their sons and daughters from this horrible disease. And so I am truly blessed to have my son Kyle still sitting here today, embracing his recovery. Like Elaine said, addiction is really a horrific family disease. It's already taken the life of my father, my eldest brother. I have 2 nephews in recovery, but it really hit home when it came for Kyle. There's a quote in an article I've read over the years that said that addiction is not a spectator sport. Eventually everyone gets to play. And it's true. It impacts the entire life of the family, from his younger brother to the family. We don't even realize we're sick until we're educated. Kyle's addiction, you know, I wish I could sit here and give you the magic list of the warning signs to look for. We went to DARE, we knew to look for behavioral changes, all of that. But Kyle in his early youth in high school was a straight A student. He played sports. We had no indication. We knew his family. We had Sunday dinners together. And still, this happened. So as his addiction grew more and more, the signs became more evident. He really completely disengaged from life and from his family. He was lying, he was stealing, he was manipulating. The insanity in our house was just not ending. And my husband and I knew we had to change, something had to change, or Kyle would die, because ultimately that's what's gonna happen. They're gonna go to jail, they're gonna embrace recovery, or they're gonna die. I'll let Kyle tell his story. He did ask for help, he went to rehab, and he can get into that. But it wasn't until we went through family education programs that we realized the impact on the family and how much his addiction had changed the dynamics in our house, especially for our youngest son, Kevin. Over the years, I've learned 3 important things. The first is to get educated as a parent. Read, most importantly, go to a meeting. Even if you're not a meeting person, there's family groups out there, there's Al-Anon. I still go to a parent support group. This is a room full of people talking about extended family. They get it. We always laugh, we can still laugh, and we say that if anybody came into that meeting, they would think we were the weirdest parents on the face of the earth. But that room is full of people that get where you are. They understand it. My closest friends, God love them, how much they tried, they still don't understand what we go through. And like Elaine said, nobody's baking me casseroles because I have an addict for a son. It just doesn't happen. So the other thing is to take care of yourself. Like they always tell you, put your oxygen mask on first and then help your child, because You have to you get lost in the process. You just get isolated, you forget about yourself, you have your hands around your addict, and that's all you can think of, and the rest of the family gets ignored. And it's just so important to do that. The biggest thing though is you have to talk about it. 8 years ago, nobody talked about this. I didn't know where to go for help. I didn't know what to do. You're embarrassed, you're ashamed. I remember when Kyle got arrested, I was petrified when I went to work the next day. Who's going to read the paper? What are they going to think of me? I'm a horrible parent. How could I possibly have let this happen to my child? You always blame yourself. But we've learned that we didn't cause it, we can't cure it, and we sure as hell can't control it. So we need to speak up. They are no longer the anonymous people. Addiction is a disease. If my child had diabetes, if my child had cancer, he would be treated with compassion and respect. And that's exactly what we need to do to our addicts. They are just like anybody else. They are wonderful, wonderful people that have a disease. So 2 of the biggest things we did is Kyle never felt unloved. I hope that Kyle always felt the love of his family. We would be mad at him some days. We certainly didn't like him many days, but we always, always loved him. And the other thing, also like Elaine says, is never, ever give up hope. Never give up on your child, because I have living proof of what not giving up hope can do. So I'd like to introduce my son, Kyle.
Hello, my name is Kyle. I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. And it's such a blessing to be here tonight, because events like... Would you be able to hear me without... This is like freaking me out a little bit. Alright, so events like this are so important, because when I first started drinking and getting high, and like even to this day, there's such a stigma about addiction, right? There's such a stigma, there's such a misconception about what a drug addict is, what a drug addict looks like. Like if you had asked me at 12, 13, 14 years old, like envision a drug addict, and I would have had this really like Hollywood conception of what a drug addict is supposed to look like. Like the bum under the bridge drinking out of a brown paper bag, somebody in their 40s or 50s who had like a really messed up childhood, or the junkie on Skid Row. But the truth is that nobody's exempt from this, right? Nobody's exempt from this. Because if you would ask me at that same age, if I had ever thought that somebody like me could ever become a drug addict, the answer would have been a resounding no. Growing up, I was a straight A student. I was a 3-sport athlete. I had a loving family. I had a big group of friends. I had everything that a kid could want, right? Somebody like me is not supposed to become a drug addict. But that's precisely what happened. Because despite all of those external things, right, on the inside, I hated me. I dealt with severe anxiety, chronic depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, and I didn't know how to deal with these things. I didn't know how to talk about these things. So I would gravitate to anything that made me feel good, anything that would take me out of me and like out of my head for like 5 minutes. And over the years, like growing up, it was a variety of things. I would throw myself into school or sports or relationships or music or art, whatever it was, but the problem was those things only worked temporarily. And at some point I would have to find the new thing. So when I was 14 and I picked up that first drink, it was like a revelation for me, right? Because you get like this warm, tingly feeling that just spreads throughout your entire body. And for the first time in my life, I felt like it was okay to be me, right? So you give someone like me a feeling like that, this feeling that I've been searching for my entire life, and I'm going to do anything that I can to get more of it. But the problem is that over time, there's something that was mentioned tonight called progression, right? Where I need more and more of a specific substance to get the same effect. And so I went through this like very chronological progression that most addicts go through, right? So from alcohol to marijuana to hallucinogens to ecstasy to cocaine to pills and ultimately to heroin. And the progression for me, I'm kind of blessed. And at the time I thought it was a curse, but in hindsight I'm blessed. It was very, very quick, right? Because very, very quickly from like the age of 16 onwards, I realized that like I had this brilliant idea, this idea that at some point every addict will have. And the idea is that if I'm just drunk and high 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I can probably cope and manage with my life. Because I had absolutely no coping skills. I didn't know how to deal with the anxiety. I didn't know how to deal with the depression. I didn't know how to deal with the fear. I didn't know how to deal with the rage that I felt inside for feeling the way that I did because I didn't deserve this. So I self-medicated, right? And I needed more and more and more. And by the time that I was 20 years old, just real quick, 2 brief experiences with incarceration. I failed out of 2 state colleges in New Jersey, one of them twice, both of which I had full academic scholarships to. I got kicked out of an honors college. I destroyed every single meaningful relationship that I had in my life. I overdosed and almost died on my best friend's couch. I bounced in and out of rehabs, halfway houses, transitional living facilities, most of which I was kicked out of just because I couldn't stay sober. And kicked out of my house, just every imaginable thing that could have gone wrong went wrong, right? I'm 20 years old and I virtually have nothing. But I'm still convinced that I don't have a problem, right? Because I suffer from this delusion. This delusion is that when I drink and when I get high, I only hurt me, right? This is my life. Let me do what I want to do with it. And that's so clearly not the reality. Addiction is like, there's this whole family component of addiction where I tear down everything and everyone around me. But the problem is I'm not willing to concede that. I'm not willing to accept that because if I do, then I have to consider possibly stop drinking and getting high. I can't live with the fact that I'm killing my family, so I'm just going to tell them, tell myself that I'm not killing, right? And so I kept doing everything that I was doing. Everything that I was doing, despite all of those consequences. Because at the end of the day, to a drug addict like me, none of that matters. The first thing that I did when I got out of jail, the first thing that I did when I got kicked out of rehabs, halfway houses, the first thing that I did every time a negative consequence happened was I went and I got high. Because I didn't know how to deal with it. How am I supposed to deal with the fact that I'm 18 years old and I just got out of jail? This isn't supposed to be happening to me. How am I supposed to deal with the fact that my family, they don't want me in the house anymore? How am I supposed to deal with this? It doesn't occur to me that my problems all started because of the drugs and the alcohol. Drugs and alcohol are my solution to everything in life. And I can't imagine living life without them. So I'm not going to, right? And unfortunately for the drug addict and the alcoholic, I suffer from this problem that once I start, I can't stop. I just can't stop, no matter how badly I want to. And so this cycle just continues on and on and on again until you hit some kind of wall. And that wall for everybody is different. But I'm blessed. I hit mine on the night of June 9th of 2011. And what happened was, I had 10 days previously, I had just finished a 90-day program in the middle of the woods in Pennsylvania. That's probably the only reason I finished the program was because it was in the middle of the woods in Pennsylvania. It was literally impossible to get drunk and high. But I get out and I come up with this brilliant idea, right? I'm I'm going to move to Reading, Pennsylvania. And it's going to be a fresh start. I'm going to be 200 miles from friends and family. I'm going to be able to drink and drug normally this time. Because again, I have this delusional thinking where I can convince myself that next time will be different. And I really, really believe it, despite all of the evidence that tells me I can't do this. So I set out and I'm I'm going to have a grand time. This is going to be awesome, right? And so I go off. Because my idea of a good night at that point was a bottle of vodka and a handful of Xanax and a couple bundles of heroin. And when you combine things like that, it's instant blackout, but that's the way that I liked it because I hated me. And I hated my life. I hated the way that I was feeling. So the closer that I was to oblivion, the easier it was to cope, right? And so 10 days with virtually no memory. But what I do remember was sheerly insane, and that's the way that I like it. So on the night of June 9th of 2011, I have got in my last drink. It was a half cc shot of vodka that I put into my vein because drinking wasn't hitting me hard, wasn't hitting me hard enough anymore. And I remember standing up and taking 2 steps, blacking out, and I miraculously came to in my own bed the next morning. And I woke up with this gut feeling that I'm not supposed to drink or get high today. And I had that feeling almost every day for 2 or 3 years at that point. I knew deep down at some core visceral level that I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But to that day, that morning, June 10th, 2011 was the first time that I listened to that voice. I said, I'm not going to drink or get high today. But without that solution, without anything to anesthetize myself, all the guilt and the shame and the remorse and the self-loathing and the hatred and the rage and the fear and the anxiety, everything that I had been running from for 6 years, it was just there, and I had nothing to cope with it. So I was parked on the side of the highway, and I begged to God that I wasn't even sure that I believed He would just take me or save me, because I couldn't live like that anymore. And that was a feeling I wasn't unfamiliar with. Like this gentleman shared earlier, like I put my head on my pillow most nights for the last 2 years of my drinking and getting high, and I did not care if I woke up the next morning. You know, I welcomed it, because I figured, you know, like whatever, if I wake up tomorrow, I'll do exactly what I did yesterday. You know, I'll find a way to drink and get high. But if I don't, it's probably a blessing for me and everybody else in the world. Right? But this day, I begged God. I was like, God, I have not asked you for anything in my entire life. Do me this one favor, throw me this one bone, and just end my life. And instead, what I got was a text message from my father. Right? And at this point, my family probably had an idea that I was drinking and getting high again, because like the way that I drink and get high, it's really hard not to know that I'm drinking and getting high. But the text message read something along the lines of like, Kyle, I know things are really challenging for you right now, and that things with the family are a mess. But we want you to know that we're proud of you and everything that you're trying to do. And I broke down. I lost it. That was my moment. Because that lie that I'd been telling myself, that lie that when I drink and when I get high only hurt me, I finally saw through it. And the reality that I destroy everything and everyone around me, it hit home, and I couldn't live with that anymore. So for the first time in my life, I picked up the phone and I reached out for help. Right? And I reached out to my family. Because through it all, through everything, I knew that they loved me. You know, they had told me, you can't come back home. They'd finished enabling me. And I hated them for that at the time, because I was like, how are you going to throw your 20-year-old son out of your house, man? Like, what the hell am I supposed to do? You know? But that was the single greatest blessing I've ever received from them, because that was a wake-up call. Right? And I figured, you know, everybody else in my life had walked out at that point, and I couldn't blame any of them. But I figured if there was anybody who might help me, it was my mother and father. So I picked up the phone and I called Mom, and for whatever reason she let me come home that night, you know, back to New Jersey. So I drive back to Jersey, and walking through the door, I think it was pretty clear what had happened, because they had seen me 10 days previously, and in those 10 days I lost somewhere between 10 and 25 pounds. I had eyes sink in the back of my head, covered in track marks. And Mom was very honest with me, right? She told me, Kyle, I love you, and I think something is different this time. I think that you really, really want the help. And we'll help you find that help, but come tomorrow morning, you got to find somewhere else to go, because we can't do this anymore. And it was the first time I heard that, and I didn't get mad, right? Because my normal reaction to you can't come home was like, excuse my language, but fuck you know? But it had started to sink in. I had destroyed my family, the people that I was supposed to love the most, and the people that I did love the most. You know, even though I lied and I stole and I cheated and I did all of those things, I never didn't love my family. You know, and that's such a stigma about addiction, is that the addict just doesn't give a shit about anybody. And there's a truth to that, because I do really horrible things when I'm drinking and when I'm getting high. But the truth is it's just deep down, I still love my family. Right? And if I had a choice, if I had an actual choice in, you know, picking up that next one or not, I would not have done the things that I did. But the truth is, anything that comes between me and my next one, when I'm drinking and I'm getting high, I am going around or through. I don't care what I have to do. But this love and support from my family was the most critical thing for me in the world. And I'm so grateful to have the family that I have, and the love and the support that they gave me. Because in early sobriety, like I moved up to Scranton, Pennsylvania, because I knew a couple of people in Alcoholics Anonymous up there. I got sober in AA. And, you know, but at that point I felt so alone and so shameful and so unloved. And to know that there were still people behind me supporting me every step of the way meant the world. And that kept me moving forward. right? And so part of this message, my message here tonight, is one of hope, right? Because you hear about addiction and you see all these statistics and all these people that are dying and getting locked up and just horrible, horrible shit. But there's so much hope too, right? Because 6.5 years later, I am not the same person that I was 6.5 years ago, right? Because today, what sobriety has given me the ability to do is to show up and be present for the other people in my life. And that, more than anything, has brought me joy, right? Because when I drink and when I get high, I'm a selfish, self-centered, arrogant prick. Like, that's just my reality. And what I've learned is that so much of what my sobriety is about giving back, right? So I can be a brother today, and I can be a son, and I can be a friend, and I can be a coworker, and I can be a student. I can be whatever the hell I need to be in life today. And that's such a blessing, right? Because it's not all about me anymore. And thank God it's not, because I'm a mess, you know? Like, let's be real. You know, I was given a second chance, and I acknowledge that. Because I had so many friends die from this disease. And it's fucking heartbreaking. I'm sorry for my language, but it's heartbreaking. You know, and I recognize that, statistically speaking, I shouldn't be alive. You know? But I am. And so, somebody really early in my sobriety told me that if you're grateful for what sobriety has given you, then it's your responsibility to give back. And so that's why I love doing things like this. Right? Because I remember at a point in my life where I knew nothing about addiction. And even when I finally came to learn about addiction in early sobriety, like, I wanted to do something to help, but I didn't know what I could do. But there's so many different things that you can do for help. And like we heard about it tonight, there's so many resources, there's so many programs, there's so many everything. But you gotta open up about it. You gotta be clear and transparent about it. And I know how hard it is to talk about because, like, you know, there's still, like, I still tell some people or it comes in a conversation that I'm a heroin addict and I still get like those looks like, what the fuck? You know? But if me doing this saves one life, and it's like in my entire lifetime, then it was all worth it. Right? So, thank you all again for letting me be here. And, that's it.
All right, so if you have questions on the card, if you could just raise your hand and we'll come around and collect them. Oh, you have it?
We do have one question that Dr. Alvin will address. If anyone has a question on the card, just raise the card, I'll pick it up.
The answer is long walks on the beach. Thanks, guys. The question is, does sugar... Oh, I'm sorry. Before I start, to the 4 testimonials and the mom, it's been such an honor to hear that story, and thank you so much. Can we get another round of applause? So the question was, does sugar affect the same reward pathways and neurotransmitting pathways as things like cocaine and opiates? And could sugar use potentially lead to addictive problems later on? So it's a very complicated subject to relate sugar to these things. The answer is probably. A lot of studies are showing that there's a relationship between how sugar affects the body and the opiate system and how opiates affect the body and that addictive quality to them. There's a plethora of studies that make the assumption that sugar is just as addictive. I don't know if I necessarily buy into the level of addiction because all these drugs work a little differently and we're built to actually consume sugar. We're not really built to consume cocaine. But so the answer is complicated. I would say that overuse of anything would lead to the activation of the dopamine reward pathway, and anything can become addictive. Sugar has a tendency to release neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and dopamine, like we've already talked about. just less directly as cocaine and the other stimulants, but it does. So theoretically, yes, it is possible that sugar consumption could potentiate addiction problems later on. But it doesn't keep me from enjoying the chocolate cake in the corner. Okay. So is there any others, or is that the only one?
That's all for you.
Okay.
And we have another question. How do you get students into the program that the students who spoke are in? So I guess that would be you, Lisa. What exactly is the name of that program? This is why. Yeah, you're gonna have to remember the Thrive part. Okay. And who to contact about that program. So, Lisa?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to say what Thrive stands for.
I know, I messed up one time before.
Last time we did it, you made it up.
Last time I tried to do the acronym, I forgot the acronym. Think Healthy, Inspire. Think Healthy. Wait, where did I go? Think Healthy. Respect. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm getting tired. Inspire, values, and empowerment. Okay. So that was Team Thrive.
Big hand for Lisa.
Sorry. Yes. So that I'm an acronym person, so I should probably figure out what the acronym means before I start talking. But it's something I believe in. I think that Team Thrive is an amazing name for that program. So how you get somebody in? Okay, so pretty much the way that it works is that we have brochures that are definitely in all of your bags. And in those bags, it will kind of guide you through that process. So, a referral can come from a school. It can come from a probation officer. It can come from a parent. It can come from DCP&P. It can come from Bergen's Promise, CMOs. It can come from pretty much anyone who's concerned about the student that wants to make that referral. We have a really amazing access to the program. We have a direct line that's also mentioned in the brochure, but what makes Team Thrive, I think, the best program is the family that I highlighted when I started, is because although the brochures have numbers, everybody knows my number and the majority of the other counselors' numbers that are in the program, because you never know when someone's going to need help, and I think it's really important to highlight relationships and building those relationships and not just emailing sometimes and picking up the phone and saying, listen, I need you to help me out. We've done it several times, all different times of the day to make sure that someone gets what they need. Does anybody else have any more questions?
No, they got it written down.
They got looked up on Team Thrive.
Okay, Crystal, gonna handle this one. What type of effect do you think the potential legalization of marijuana in New Jersey will have on our teens? How can we minimize the negative impact?
All right, so this is a big question, a big hot topic. I think that it has multiple effects, right? I think that unfortunately all of the legalization efforts, and it looks like New Jersey is headed down that road, creates this decreased perception of risk, right? Because they think it's legal, right? Why can't I do it too? However, the truth is that the risk these days is even higher. I don't know how many people went out and saw, I'm having a lapse on his name now, but there was a presentation recently, and you really look at the marijuana that kids are smoking these days is not the marijuana that the baby boomers and any of us that may or may not have smoked in the past were smoking. All right, the potency of THC is much higher. The concentrates, right, are very dangerous. The edibles, all right, there is some really scary stuff out there that's much more potent. So while they see the perception as lower, right, the perception of risk is actually much higher, right? So how is that going to affect our teens, and what can we do? Education, okay? No one is advocating for marijuana to be legal for adolescents. No one, all right? We can go back to what the doctor spoke of about that developing brain, and about how it affects, the pruning out and the connections that are made in the brain, which helps, that frontal lobe and all those higher learning functionings. It helps with impulse control, right? It helps with coping skills, right? If we're not able to develop those coping skills, we're going to go to other things to cope with things. So I think it is, it is and can have a major impact because it's normalizing it. So I think it really is the role of professionals to provide that education, but also for families and parents to educate themselves and realize that we should not minimize it. We should not say, oh, well, when I was in college, I smoked too, and, big deal. It is a different pot out there today. And I think we really just have to provide that education. It's one thing that I feel very strongly about, and we are talking about making this a series of types, so that might be a specific topic that we talk about in the future.
All right.
So really quickly, one of the things that I want to mention is that at Children's Aid and Family Services, the Center for Alcohol and Drug Resources, we're always looking for recovery specialists. If anyone in this room, or if you know anybody who has 3 or more years of clean time, we'd love to have them come down and fill out an application for a recovery specialist. Recovery specialist is someone who goes bedside to a Narcan reversal. We actually got expansion dollars to now go ahead and go into hospitals for people who have an opioid use disorder. So I would really love if anybody knows anybody who'd like to become a recovery specialist and have more opportunities that were in front of us here today with the teens. I would love to get your name and number at the end of this meeting. Thank you.
All right, I would just like to thank everybody. I mean, the families that spoke, the kids, just amazing. I want to thank Deb again for helping us put this together. Thank you very much.